So we've seen a spate of robberies in New York City that's been attributed to a Venezuelan gang, and a lot of them have come over within this surge of migrants from Venezuela into the United States.
So since the asylum crisis started, over 200,000 people alone have come through New York City, but they haven't been alone. And a number of gang members have entered sanctuary cities like New York, masquerading as legitimate asylum seekers. But their goals are not legitimate, and that's a big problem, not just for sanctuary cities, but also for any city or state touching one.
A notorious Venezuelan gang has quickly expanded its criminal operations into the United States, raising alarms among U.S. law enforcement officials.
Homeland Security officials tell NBC News they have more than 100 criminal investigations nationwide into TDA, calling TDA the next MS-13.
And you know, police tell us that the migrant crisis has really made this problem so much worse. Here along busy Roosevelt Avenue, not only is there increased gang activity, but also migrant women from other countries desperate to find a job.
They're more organized, they're more structured, and they're involved in so many different crimes. You name the crime, they're going to be involved in it.
It is an infestation. It's taking hold, not just in New York, it's up in Michigan. It's spreading. If people don't wake up and see it for what it is, we're going to be in a lot of trouble in this country.
This is supposed to be a restaurant, and if you look at it, it's listed as a foot massage place.
The bust happening directly across the street from multiple schools, and Chief of Detectives Joseph Kenny says the influx of migrants is fueling the problem.
And with that, you see some gang activity.
Not only are they citywide, but they are operating inside the city's migrant shelters, like this one behind me.
After crossing the border, dangerous gang members are being found not just in New York, but also in neighboring New Jersey. But what nobody's talking about is that both New York and New Jersey, even though they're sanctuary states, the growing presence of gangs in either state couldn't be happening without what's going on right here in New York City, where critics say our generous right-to-shelter laws take things one step further than sanctuary status and have made us an unwilling participant in the growth of gang-related crime throughout the region. Because it's one thing to be a sanctuary city with laws that harbor federal fugitives and protect them from justice, but it's quite another to offer free housing, food, and medical care to people who say they're here for the American dream, but aren't. And it's another thing to not deny somebody access to such generosity after they're caught committing a crime, which critics say is a big problem not just for New York City, which is unknowingly aiding a small number of people who are secretly gang members, but also for every city and town near New York, because the way crime works is once you've got a critical mass of bad guys, their evil empire will spread. A big problem in progressive areas of America with soft on crime laws that don't send people to jail for robbery or assault and prosecute criminals by protecting them, oftentimes dismissing or downgrading serious offenses like weapons charges, to the point where people who used to be in jail in other parts of the world do those same things here and just get a slap on the wrist. Which brings us to the real reason law-abiding areas of the country that border sanctuary cities are now in danger. Those sanctuary policies are no longer some cute way to rebel against seemingly unjust border security measures. Instead, they make cities like New York, Denver, and Chicago a danger to the rest of the nation. And as you're about to see, these gangs are turning the neighbors of sanctuary cities like New York into crime-ridden no-go zones, all because of what we allow to happen right here. So here we are at the Port Authority bus terminal, and every week in New York, between 600 to 1,000 asylum seekers still arrive looking for a place to stay. Now, proponents of New York's right-to-shelter policies that mandate housing for families, children, and single adults are right that these policies do keep people from living on the street. But critics say these policies also allow a small number of gang members to sneak in along with legitimate asylum seekers, establish themselves, and then spread out committing crime.
So tell me, Robert, who is this group, Tren de Aragua? What kind of people are they?
They originated out of a prison, Tocoron prison in the state of Aragua in the country of Venezuela. And basically, the government official there basically told the gang leaders that you guys take over the prison. So there were no more prison guards. The Tren de Aragua gang members were actually running the prison, and then they're released from prison.
So these are like the last people that you would want getting into a place that's trying to help out legitimate folks. Some of these individuals used to be in prison. And now you've got members of the criminal underworld using New York City's generosity against it and against other cities and towns and states like New Jersey that touch New York City. And recently, gang members who've committed crimes in and around the New York area have been arrested, and some have even given residential addresses to authorities as shelter locations. And we're seeing this happen at sanctuary cities all across the country, not just in New York. Take, for example, Aurora, Colorado. It's not a sanctuary city, but it's next to one, Denver, Colorado, and criminal activity that was taking place there has now spilled out into Aurora, just like it's now spilling from New York City into New Jersey. And what's fascinating is this is all happening under the umbrella of a system that is supposed to help asylum seekers get on their feet. Yet how can the system accomplish its goal of helping the vulnerable if it's actually being co-opted by dangerous criminals who shouldn't be there in the first place? Obviously, that's not going to be possible, and this reveals a big problem with sanctuary cities, as they are now a scourge on their entire region because they have laws and policies that conflict with the laws of the rest of the country. Laws and policies which critics say don't protect the vulnerable from crooks, but instead protect those crooks from justice and, in some cases, deportation. And look at this map right here. This is the route that apparently these gang members are using to come into the country. They're doing it along with legitimate asylum seekers, just doing their best to blend in, where they then make their way to sanctuary cities like New York, Chicago, Denver. And what then happens is as soon as they get to these areas, they immediately start finding opportunities and places where they can commit crime. Sometimes those opportunities might not be in the city itself. Sometimes they might be just outside.
As a matter of fact, I think we're already in trouble, to be honest with you. We're already in trouble because they've been here for a while. They're more organized, they're more structured, and they're involved in so many different crimes. You name the crime, they're going to be involved in it. You know, I'm concerned.
If there's a crime going on, this gang is going to be involved in it. That's a crazy statement. That means they really have no boundaries. And as a transnational criminal organization, these guys are up to things our country's just not prepared for. And with a critical mass of these gang members having found their way to New York, there's a whole lot they can do. The first thing they can do is grow their numbers, because here at the bus terminal, you can get cheap transportation in and out of the city whenever you want. And every week there are new potential recruits coming into the city who will soon be disenfranchised by its shelter system. And sadly, our shelter system, which is supposed to be helping people who move into it get on their feet and get plugged into our economy, it's failing in that mission. First of all, it evicts people after just 30 days, which isn't enough time for some people who've just come here to get established and get a job, often leading to those folks pitching tents and just camping out in the parks and streets nearby where those shelters are located. And although New York City's ability to house the entire world in shelters for an unlimited period of time is probably non-existent, this system of failure gives gangs a visual example that they can point to and say, see, look, this is the poverty that you'll experience if you don't join up with us. And if that doesn't work, apparently these gangs are also resorting to intimidation tactics, telling asylum seekers that if they don't join up with them, they will be branded as enemies of the gang. And who wants that, especially in a city that's invited you into its shelters, saying that they'll take care of you and then evicts you in just 30 days? A lot of these people feel like they're on their own, and they are. And before we get into the types of crimes that are now being committed in areas near New York City, it's important to understand that none of this could happen without our failing shelter apparatus. And as long as that apparatus exists, this situation, these gangs will continue to be enabled in the worst way possible. And the worst thing about all of this is these shelters were supposed to be temporary. They were only supposed to be needed just by each person for a few weeks. That's it. Yet it now appears our shelter industrial complex wants to exist forever. And for that reason, the immigration magnet critics say that it will continue, and there will always be people coming here looking to access it, not knowing that the whole situation is a gigantic trap, because the same people moving into these facilities are leaving them in no better shape than they were when they got there initially. And this is particularly astonishing when you look at how things affect asylum seekers from Venezuela. Many of these folks have been granted a humanitarian designation called temporary protected status, which allows them to get work authorization not in the usual 180-day waiting period, but in as little as 30 days. Yet we still have mass unemployment, revealing that our job economy hasn't connected as many asylum seekers with full-time employment where they can work on their own as many people, including asylum seekers, were led to believe it would. And now people People getting off buses and entering our city thinking that they're about to achieve the American dream are achieving something else. And in some cases, they're being fed right to the lions, these gang members, so to speak.
Once thought to be limited to Latin America, where it was known for brutal tactics and extensive criminal networks, Tren de Aragua has evolved into a significant transnational threat, a growing concern for U.S. law enforcement. Originating in a Venezuelan prison.
So these gangs, it's important to understand, once they get inside the country, you only need 1 or 2 members, but then they can start recruiting. And once they grow their criminal empire, then they can spread it out and start committing crime in other places, which is what we're now seeing. That's the second thing they can do. And New Jersey is now one of 8 states where gang-related crime activity is up. And the problem here is that a lot of the issues New York City is causing for itself locally are no longer local problems. They're being exported to places that have nothing to do with our rules, have nothing to do with our sanctuary city status or our right to shelter. All of which exist to solve problems and fix societal injustices, but are now less just than they started out being because they enable fugitives and gang members to hide in plain sight. So what's crazy about this is this whole idea of sanctuary cities. They failed as an idea if they're now harboring criminals and exporting that crime outside of their borders. That's a big issue because now they're causing problems in places where people can't vote on whether or not those sanctuary city laws or policies should change. That's an issue. And the growth of these gangs and the problems they cause are showing no signs of slowing down.
This video of armed men roaming an apartment complex in Aurora last month went viral. It was captured by Cindy Romero's security camera.
This was terrifying, and I don't wish it on anybody.
She says the nightly violence forced her to move.
It was never meant to be.
So this example in Aurora, Colorado, it's so fitting because that city doesn't control the policies of Denver, the larger sanctuary city nearby it, which some say is the source of the criminal activity that took over those apartment buildings. There's doubt as to whether or not this gang would have set up shop there if they hadn't already been in the area. And look at this, now millions of dollars are being poured into local law enforcement there. That's crazy, all because of policies nearby that are negatively affecting them. And this is happening because of a system that was set up to benefit vulnerable people who might be unjustly treated by our immigration systems in America. That's why you have a sanctuary city, but how much help are those vulnerable people getting if the same gangs they fled are now taking up residence all across this country? And critics are saying all these laws have done is take what is supposed to be a safe space for everybody, a law-abiding city, and turn it into a safe place for criminals, some of whom were in prison at one point recently, but now will never be deported because they're in a place that doesn't do that. And take a look at what this is doing to middle-class neighborhoods throughout our country, not just in New York, but outside of it.
And you know, police tell us that the migrant crisis has really made this problem so much worse. Here along busy Roosevelt Avenue, not only is there increased gang activity, but also migrant women from other countries desperate to find a job.
We say no more, and we're going to shut you down.
That's the promise from officers raiding this Roosevelt Avenue massage parlor.
According to the
So that right there, that's Roosevelt Avenue in Queens, a working class neighborhood in New York City, which gets no help from the city as far as crime prevention goes. There are not enough police up there. There are not enough city resources to deal with the overflow of just lawlessness that's taking over that part of town. And most of the crime that we're hearing about from these gangs, it's not taking place where the rich live. This is hurting your average Americans. This is hurting your working class New Yorkers, your working class people in New Jersey and in Aurora, Colorado. And it's turning these places into the wild, wild west. Right now on Roosevelt Avenue, you've got open air theft markets where people just sell stuff that they stole from stores on Roosevelt Avenue. And the city just will not divert police resources over there to put a stop to all of this. And some of this gang-related crime was taking place across the street from an elementary school of all places. That's ridiculous. You've got little kids that have to walk by this stuff that's taking place in their own neighborhood and see it and witness it. That's terrible. But the problems New York is experiencing aren't just because it's a sanctuary city. It's because this is a sanctuary city where criminals can do things and never get sent to jail. If this was the kind of city that put people in jail for stealing things, you wouldn't have open-air theft markets. And if people weren't getting away with selling things on the side of the street, they might not sell illegal things on the side of the street or start illegal businesses. And by tolerating a certain level of lawlessness at all times, we've enabled these gangs to grow and establish themselves and get resources and then use those resources elsewhere.
So one of the issues that law enforcement are facing in some of these areas where this gang has been present, sanctuary city laws. That's because ICE cannot be involved. DHS, though, did kick out an alert to agents with information on how to spot Tren de Aragua gang members. So look at these tattoos here.
So really, you've just got this dynamic duo of bad policies in a sanctuary city. If somebody does something wrong, they're covered in gang tattoos and the police arrest them. Not only do they often get released if it's a progressive jurisdiction, but that person, they have a gang tattoo right here, some sort of symbol, and the police say, you know what, that looks like something. They can't check to see if that person's wanted by federal immigration authorities. They have to keep it a secret because immigration status doesn't matter in a sanctuary.
And what's so ridiculous about this is all throughout New York, we're blanketed with signs talking about how bad